Hey everyone, it's the Koopa Man. Ever get to thinking about certain villains in fiction and media? The way that some of them are so vile you question if they were ever good to begin with? Well, today we're going to be talking about a trope I like to call born evil. The idea that some characters, villains specifically, are so evil that they were corrupted ever since they were in their mother's womb. What got me thinking about this was the Dragon Ball fan webcomic called Unguarded, which goes over a fan-made potential backstory regarding the villain Frieza. In canon, Frieza isn't all that complicated. If anything, he's rather two-dimensional. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Some stories, like Dragon Ball, can use two-dimensional villains in order to push a plot and narrative. Frieza was the self-proclaimed strongest in the universe, and this justified to him his actions, as him being the strongest gives him the right to rule over the universe as a tyrant. He was raised with a massive ego, believing nothing to be stronger than he is, with the exception of Majin Buu and the God of Destruction, and then gets his teeth punched in by the very thing he feared most, a low-class Saiyan from a backwater planet having ascended in power to surpass him immensely. It's a very simple story arc of pride goeth before a fall. Frieza in Unguarded, however, is a bit more complex. It tells the tale of Frieza's childhood, from birth to the moment he kills a bunch of monkeys like a liquored-up hillbilly at a zoo with a shotgun. As a child, Frieza is very close to his mother, and thus a lot less of a prick than he is in canon, or as his brother Cooler is. However, a series of events, including the injury and eventual death of his mother, his father training him, his brother antagonizing him, among other events, begin to change him. He becomes more vengeful and violent, and eventually he admits to himself that he enjoys being cruel and violent. The only real friendship he has is with a young Saiyan girl he meets when his father brought a contingent of Saiyans to be trained to eradicate the Tuffles, a friendship he loses when she's caught by Salza and threatened by King Cold. She is then returned to the Saiyans, and Frieza is thus isolated from any and all who would keep him from becoming the tyrant he is destined to be. While this is a loose synopsis, and if you don't mind fanfics, I highly recommend this webcomic series. It goes to show that someone even as evil as Frieza has the potential to never been fully born evil. You may be wondering if I'm contradicting myself from my previous sympathetic villains video. Well, there's a key difference. You can have a villain with a sympathetic backstory to explain how they became what they are, without having them being presently sympathetic. An example of this is Victor Von Doom, otherwise known as Dr. Doom from Marvel Comics. Doom is an interesting character to say the least. Born in the country of Latveria to a pair of gypsies, Doom lost his mother at a young age to Mephisto and his father to the Lord of Latveria known as the Baron. Orphaned and alone, Victor pursued knowledge of science and magic to save his mother and never fall victim to tragedy ever again. He would go to America to attend university at NYU and meet Reed Richards. One day, when he was trying to use his knowledge to build a machine that allowed him to save his mother, Richards pointed out a serious flaw in its design, which Victor's pride had him rebuff and go through with it anyway. The result was a catastrophic explosion that damaged Doom's face and his reputation, something that he blames Richards for to this very day. He would eventually wander the world before meeting with a Tibetan monk who forged him the armor he now wears today, and with this, he returned to Latveria to overthrow the Baron and become the nation's new ruler, ruling with a literal iron fist. You can sympathize with his tragic backstory, but Doom had every chance to not be evil and refused it at every turn. He just views himself as unnecessary evil. Similar to Doom is the JoJo's villain Dio Brando. Dio was born to Dario Brando and his wife. Dario was an abusive drunk and a thief who squandered every opportunity he had, including ones given to him by George Joestar, a man he accidentally saved who paid him a life debt and invested in his business. Dario abused his wife until her death, as well as Dio. Dio, fed up with the abuse and neglect of his father, as well as living in poverty, poisoned Dario in his sleep and then was adopted by George Joestar. So Dario may not have been a saint, but poisoning him was a bit extreme. However, what did Dio do with this new chance? He kicked his adopted brother's dog and then made his life a living hell by belittling him, abusing him, stealing the first kiss from a girl he liked, all before burning his dog alive. Yeah, Dio had it hard, but he was not going to be redeemed. Even later in the story where it seems like he was redeemed, he jumped off the slippery slope the first time it presented itself. But it is sort of debatable whether he's evil because he was born evil, or whether this was the result of years of Dario's abuse. In Steel Ball Run, we see a version of Dio named Diego Brando who is far less evil, while still being evil, who didn't have Dario Brando as his sole caretaker in his formative years. Diego Brando is willing to do wicked actions, but he is at worst a social climber and a misanthrope, not a power mad sociopathic vampire vampire like his alternate universe counterpart. So one could make the argument that Dio Brando was not born evil. And then there's Griffith, a man who decided not to settle for being part of the problem, rather he would become the whole problem. Griffith, like Dio, was born into poverty. Unlike Dio, though, he wasn't outwardly a prick. In fact, through his teenage years, he'd formed the mercenary band, the Band of the Falcon, and would become quite the heroic figure in Midland. He even prevented Casca from being raped and allowed himself to be used by a perverted lord to secure a future for his mercenary band. So what's the problem? Well, he was also given a Bayolet, an evil, cursed amulet by a gypsy woman who also foretold him conquering all of Midland, and that became his primary ambition. And when the moment came and the Bayolet called to him, he sacrificed his entire mercenary band for the promise of unlimited power, becoming the God Hand Femto, among other notoriously evil actions. Nothing that Griffith ever did from that point could be considered redeemable, moral, or justifiable, and it is without a doubt that he's beyond saving. Griffith must die. Even before his fall, there were seeds of his true nature hidden just underneath. However, had he not been chosen by the Bailiff, it could be argued that he'd never fallen as far. As far as fiction goes, there are many horrible villains who started from more humble origins. Other examples include the Joker, provided you believe the Killing Joke origin story, Adam Taurus, Cinderfall, and Salem from Ruby, Virgil from Devil May Cry, among others. However, there are sometimes characters who are so evil they're noted by their creators to have been born evil. This is where we enter into true fiction, as it cannot be argued that anyone in real life was ever born evil. Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars, for example, is noted by George Lucas to have been born evil. Palpatine had been born into an aristocratic family on the planet of Naboo, but has been stated to have murderous intentions even when he was just an infant. Growing up, Palpatine wanted one thing: power. He hated his father Consigna for his lack of ambition, and he used his family wealth to acquire relics and writings of the ancient Sith Order. When Ego Damask, otherwise known as Darth Plagueis, would discover Palpatine, he would already be very well versed in the cult's teachings and the secret knowledge of the dark side. He would then order Palpatine to kill his own family as his induction into the Sith, something Palpatine relished in. Palpatine in the expanded universe text and the Word of God himself is a character who could never really be redeemed. He was truly born evil, and there's no changing that. Is it realistic? Not really. Morality is a dance between nature and nurture, in all honesty, but it does make for a really good story. There's also an example from Harry Potter. I can hear the coin flip gang screeching already. In the character of Tom Riddle, otherwise known as Voldemort. Voldemort was born in an unusual circumstance, as his mother was a witch from a family of pure-blood supremacists who fell in love with a wealthy muggle man. She wanted him to love her back, so she used a love potion on him until she was with child, and then was surprised when he ran out and then died of a broken heart. Probably should have been common sense, but, you know, women. Anyway, Voldemort, then Tom, grew up alone and outcast in an orphanage, until he was visited by Professor Dumbledore, who invited him to attend Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. It was here he was sorted into Slytherin House, which has the unfortunate status of being where all the baddies get sorted into, because Rowling's view on the houses was a bit simplistic, and from there he'd end up learning how to use dark magic, killing some Muggle-born students, even though he never had that bias before, and becoming the Dark Wizard Voldemort. Though Harry Potter is a bit unique, as in Chamber of Secrets, at least in the film, it's made explicitly clear that Voldemort's evil wasn't the result of his birth, rather the choices he made.
It's just... You see, sir, I couldn't help but notice certain things, certain similarities between Tom Riddle and me.
I see. Well, you can speak Parcel tongue, Harry. Why? Because Lord Voldemort can speak Parcel tongue. If I'm not mistaken, Harry, he transferred some of his powers to you the night he gave you that scar.
Voldemort transferred some of his powers to me.
Not intentionally, but yes.
So the Sorting Hat was right. I should be in Slytherin.
It's true, Harry. You possess many of the qualities that Voldemort himself prizes. Determination, resourcefulness, and if I may say so, a certain disregard for the rules. Why then did the Sorting Hat place you in Gryffindor?
Because I asked it to.
Exactly, Harry, exactly. Which makes you different from Voldemort. It is not our abilities that show what we truly are. It is our choices.
When we talk about more godlike characters, however, such as Darkseid, the Chaos Gods, Shaitan from Wheel of Time, Morgoth, and others, then it's more reasonable to assume said characters were born evil as their embodiments of evil itself. You cannot use the same metrics with celestial beings that you can on mortal beings, as the divine is supposed to be incomprehensible and immeasurable by mortal standards, hence why no limits fallacy rarely applies to them. Even Palpatine, it can be argued, falls under this godlike status, as he's a figure whom the dark side of the Force prophesies would be born to be the one true Sith, according to the old EU lore. As such, it's likely to assume that played a major part in his birth and overall nature. However, it could also be argued that if that were the case, then Anakin Skywalker, the Force's chosen one, would have been incapable of falling to the dark side and becoming Darth Vader. Heck, even the devil himself was once stated to be an angel before letting his pride get the better of him. So can characters be truly born evil? Well, it depends on the author's word and how they write it. Even then, it's always open to interpretation like any piece of media tends to be. Are we truly the result of our natures? Or are we the sum of our decisions in life? What would happen if we would have taken the road less traveled? These are the kind of questions that keep me up at night. Well, I believe that we'll have to leave this question for the comments, as it seems it's a pretty hard standard to define. I'd say no wonder TV Tropes doesn't have it as a listed trope if I could only find one good example. But I am sure the reason they don't have it listed is some lefty nonsense of one stripe or another. Anyway, that'll be all for this week. If you know any characters you believe fit the born evil criteria, let's discuss it in the comments. Maybe we can get a good discussion going. Oh, and before you ask, Swordsman, I got the whole thing in the cards for Carnage coming this autumn, so stay tuned for that. Anyway, if you liked this video, be sure to leave it a thumbs up and subscribe, as it helps me with the algorithm. And until next time, this has been the Koopa Man. Game on.